There are so many distractions in life, and some of them can really get us off track. So how do we keep our head on straight in the middle of it all and find our way forward? Hi, I'm Rob, and it's great to be able to catch up with you for a few moments here today. Let me take a moment just to remind you of our interactive teaching videos that are available for kids. You'll find those on Facebook, and when you're on Facebook, a simple search for Cabin Kids will help you find our page. Now, over these few weeks in May, we're exploring how do you move forward when you feel frozen. We all love progress, like when things are going well in our lives, but as we come into times that are uncertain, how do we find our way forward? This week, our guest, Dr. Steve Lennox, president of Kingswood University, will share with us about keeping our head in the cloud. Be sure and stick around as he concludes as we plan to partake together in communion at the conclusion of his message.
Our text for today comes from Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, verses we've chosen to focus on here at Kingswood as our verse of the year for this academic year. The writer of Hebrews says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God." The writer of Hebrews talks about a cloud. Now, clouds are funny things. We prefer a cloudless sky. It's not a compliment for somebody to tell you you have your head in the clouds, but we're always trying to purchase more space in the cloud where we can store our pictures. But the cloud that the writer of Hebrews talks about is nothing like that. This is a cloud of witnesses. And if there ever was a cloud to get your head into, this is it. Now, when he talks about a cloud of witnesses, what does he mean by witnesses? Are they people that we witness what they're doing, or are they witnessing what we're doing? The writer goes on to describe a race, and so one might imagine stands filled with spectators who are witnessing the race as it's being run. And this could be what the writer of Hebrews is referring to. They are witnessing what we are doing. But I think, in fact, he's talking about us witnessing what they have done. After all, he's just spent an entire chapter in Hebrews 11 describing the heroes of the faith, and then says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, we are meant to be looking to them to see how they did it in order to help us know how to do it." Now, who's in this cloud? Well, clearly everybody in Hebrews 11 is in this cloud, but I would also say that it's everybody that's in the room with you right now, whether you're in a sanctuary or sitting at home with some friends, whoever it is that's there, sitting 2 meters or 6 feet from you. If they're a believer in Jesus Christ, they're part of this cloud. Who else is in this cloud? Well, every Christian that's ever lived from the very beginning of Christianity to the present is in this cloud, living or dead. Who else is in this cloud? Every Christian alive around the world is in this cloud. Who else is in this cloud? You and me. We're in this cloud. We're part of this cloud of witnesses. But what I think is fascinating in this passage is not just that there is this cloud, but somehow being aware of this cloud, having our head in this cloud, so to speak, is going to help us persevere in running the race marked out for us. And we know this because of the word in the text, since. That word means, because this is true, therefore this can be true. Since you have an MBA, you will be our church treasurer. Since you have a pickup truck, you will help me move. Since you have the right tool for the job, you will be able to fix the problem that we face. Having something means we're able to do something. And in this case, since we have this great cloud of witnesses, we are better able to persevere in the race marked out for us. Now, how does that work? How does it work that by having our head in this cloud, being aware of this cloud, we are better able to run with perseverance this race marked out for us? And I hate to have to do this, but I'm going to show you how this works by pointing out your blind spots. You know what blind spots are. Think of your car. That's that spot in your car which you cannot see. You look at the mirrors and you think you know what's to your right or to your left, but you can't tell because there's a blind spot. There's a blind spot in the front of your car, which you can't see. There's a blind spot to the rear of your car, which you can't see. And the thing about blind spots is if you're not aware of them, and if you don't compensate for them, you can be blindsided by some disaster. People have blind spots. Everybody else can see it except for you, whether it's something about yourself or something about someone you love. Cultures have blind spots. Things that everybody in the culture just seems to miss and be unaware of. But just like with your car, if you're unaware of these blind spots, you are about to have a disaster. And that's the case with our own culture. There are blind spots. But if we keep our head in the clouds, it allows us to get a perspective on these blind spots and avoid being blindsided. So what are these blind spots of our culture? Well, let me just give you 5. Here's one. Materialism. Ours is a culture that is has a blind spot of materialism. Now, by materialism, I mean, obviously, the almighty dollar. If you're in Canada, it's being loony for a loony. Culture is so focused on making a living. But materialism goes beyond that. Materialism isn't just about money. It's about the things that money can buy. Security, comfort. Because at the bottom line, a materialist values things he can see over things he can't see. The materialist values the material, the visible, over the invisible. And that's a blind spot. And it leads to being blindsided if we're not careful. And unfortunately, we find that to some degree in the church as well. Here at Kingswood, we recruit students who have a call to ministry to be a pastor or a missionary. And do you know what is sometimes one of the biggest obstacles to having that son or daughter come? It's the parent. The Christian parent, the Christian grandparent, the Christian friend who says to this young man or this woman that has a call to serve God with their life, are you sure you want to do that? You going to make any money doing that? Isn't that dangerous? Materialism, it's a blind spot. But having our head in this cloud of witnesses allows us to be aware of this blind spot. How's that work? Well, can you see the cloud of witnesses? You may be able to see the people in the room with you, but that's as far as it goes. The vast majority of the cloud of witnesses is invisible, not visible. And how is it that we get in this cloud of witnesses? It's by faith. And faith, by definition, is a matter of seeing the invisible. And so what we're saying is that the very idea of a cloud of witnesses privileges the invisible over the visible. Let's look at it another way. This cloud of witnesses has, by their example, shown us that there are more important things than what money can buy. Just think back through chapter 11. Abraham called to leave God, leave his family and follow God, leave behind everything that he had known, his friends, his family, his worldview, what was security, and go to a place he wasn't even sure where it was. Think of Moses. There he was in the household of Pharaoh, entitled to all the wealth and privileges that meant. And yet he turns his back on the material for the invisible. You see, this cloud of witnesses is made up of people who've decided that the invisible is more significant than the visible. And if you and I can get our head in this cloud, if we can think like they think, we too will see this blind spot, and we will choose what matters most. We will choose the way of faith. Here's another blind spot. It's individualism. You hear a lot about rights, not so much about responsibilities. Responsibilities are what I do for the group because I'm a part of this group, but rights, that which we hear most about, is what the group owes to me, and that becomes the subtext for much of what goes on in Western culture. It's about me, it's about my rights, it's about my identity, it's about my self-fulfillment, it's about individualism and autonomy. Now, there's a lot of good things about individuals and autonomy, but that's a blind spot of our culture. I saw this illustrated several months back when the U.S. was debating a new Supreme Court justice, Justice Barrett. She's a Roman Catholic, charismatic, part of a small group of individuals who hold one another accountable. They ask one another's opinion. They let others in the group speak into their lives and hold them accountable. Well, the news media didn't know what to do with this. This idea that you would actually let someone speak into your life, and they were using terms like cult. They just didn't understand. And that's because there's a blind spot, this blind spot of individualism. And we find that blind spot in the church as well. I heard a pastor talking not too long ago. His church closed down because of COVID, and there were people who were complaining that the church ought to open up again. And so the church eventually was able to open up again and hold services, but they required people to wear masks. And this pastor said the same people who complained about not being able to be at church refused to come to church if they had to wear a mask. Now, I don't know all the motives, but it sounds to me like a kind of Lone Ranger Christianity. It's got to be my way or it's the highway. That's a blind spot. And what we need more than anything as a church is to get our head in the clouds, to recognize that we are part of a cloud of witnesses, a community, the people in our lives who hold us accountable and whom we hold accountable, the people to whom we are responsible and they to us, the people who God designed into our lives to help us grow. Who are the people in your life that can point out an area of your life which you may want to think about? Who are the people that you can talk to with that level of frankness and honesty? This is the way God designed us, to be in this cloud of witnesses with those around us, to grow as a community. John Wesley, whom many of us look to as a spiritual father, put it this way. He said, "There is no holiness but social holiness." We were designed to grow in this cloud of witnesses. Here's a third blind spot. Parochialism. Now, I know that's a big word, but essentially what it means is us versus them. And I probably don't need to go any further, do I? Western culture is just rife with this idea of us versus them. We know exactly who's in and who's out, who's like us and who isn't like us. And we've built these walls. And we see it as well in the church. Parochialism. Who's like us? Who isn't like us? We need to get our head in the clouds. Because when we get our head in the cloud of witnesses, what we discover is that there's a whole world of people who aren't like us, but they're part of this cloud of witnesses. It may be a little challenging. I remember growing up in a church probably very similar to yours. Nobody ever told me this, but I wasn't quite sure that anybody but the people in my denomination were getting to heaven. The Nazarenes, I'm not so sure. Free Methodists, I'm not so sure. Baptists, I'm not so sure. Pentecostals, I'm pretty sure they're not going to make it. At least that's the way I thought. And wouldn't you know it, my roommate in college was a Pentecostal. And not just any Pentecostal, he was a flaming Pentecostal. He was the kind of Pentecostal that wouldn't even take an aspirin for a headache because it demonstrated a lack of faith. And we spent the whole year together, and it was a year for me to discover something more about this cloud of witnesses. that there are people who are in this cloud who are a brother or a sister in the faith, and yet, though we agree on the core, we disagree on doctrines and beliefs and opinions. But we're part of the same cloud of witnesses. We can learn a lot from the people who are in this cloud of witnesses, who don't worship like us, who don't dress like us, who don't think like us, who don't explain things like us. We can learn a lot about the people who are in this cloud of witnesses. We can break down these walls of parochialism in this cloud of witnesses. If we just get our head in the cloud, there's a lot to learn. A number of years ago, I went to Zambia to teach the Bible at a Bible college there. I was teaching the book of Psalms, and I taught the book of Psalms for years. I wrote a commentary on the book of Psalms. I think I understand a little bit about the book of Psalms, but can I tell you that sitting in that classroom with the dozen or so Zambian pastors, I learned more about the Psalms than I knew before. They taught me. They saw the Psalms from a perspective that I, from my privileged Western position, did not see. And they taught me about the Psalms. This is what we find when we get in this cloud of witnesses. These walls of parochialism are broken down, and we see just how big and beautiful the kingdom of God is if we can get our head in the cloud. There is also the blind spot of presentism. That's a kind of funny word, but all it means is that our culture views a belief as true if it's new and wrong if it's old. So I have an iPhone. If I have an iPhone 11, it's better than an iPhone 8. But this idea of presentism works a lot better with iPhones than it does with ideas. Just because an idea is new doesn't make it true. Now, it doesn't make it false either, but our culture has a blind spot, just assumes that an idea that is new must be true. Let me give you an illustration. Who are you? I mean, what's your identity? How do you identify yourself? Here are some of the newer ways of identifying who you are. Your political persuasion, your ethnic identity, your education, what you do for a living, where you live, who your friends are, who you know. Those are new ideas. Let me give you an old idea. Who are you? You are a child of God. I'm sorry, it's an old idea. It may be one of the oldest ideas we have, but it's true. You and I are made in the image of God. We're children of God. That's an old idea, but it's true. And if we can just get our head in the clouds, we will understand from the centuries of Christian teaching some really old ideas that are more true than anything we hear today. We get our head in the clouds. I heard of a seminary student who had some doubts about the faith, and he thought, I'll go to our theology professor and he'll explain these things to me. And the theology professor happened to be J.I. Packer, the great British theologian. And so he went to Professor Packer and he shared his doubts and just waited for Professor Packer to explain everything away. But he didn't. Instead, he told the student to go off and read John Calvin's Institutes of Religion. Calvin was the reformer in the 16th century, and the Institutes of Religion are a vast and dense compendium of Christian theology. So, needless to say, the seminary student wasn't real keen on the assignment. But, to his credit, that's what he did. He took his doubts to this dense theological masterwork, and as he read it, his doubts dissipated. Why? Because Calvin's a brilliant theologian? Well, he is, but that's not the reason. This student entered into the vast treasury of wisdom that the church contains. This cloud of witnesses is filled with answers that we have yet to hear. We need to get our head in the clouds. I confess that in my Christian life, I've sometimes felt like that Christianity was just a house of cards, and all it would take was the firm breath of one more skeptic, it would all blow away. Listen, I've got news for you. If you get your head in the clouds, what you discover is the church has thought long and hard about just about everything, and it has some pretty good answers. If we can get past the blind spot of presentism and recognize that there's truth, what we discover is rather than a house of cards, Christianity is a mansion built on a solid foundation, filled with rooms of information that you can explore to your heart and your mind's content. But you got to get your head in the clouds. One more blind spot, and that's the blind spot of fear. Now, I'm not suggesting that culture today is the only culture that's felt fear, but wouldn't you agree that our culture is more racked with fear than it's ever been? Even before COVID, wouldn't you agree that ours is an anxious age? We're concerned about our material prosperity. We're concerned about our security. We're concerned about comfort. We're concerned about answers and meaning. And I would suggest we need to get our head in the clouds. Because if we can get our head in this cloud of witnesses, what we discover is that there is, it's more solid in the cloud than it is anywhere else. There's a reason for hope. There's a reason for a firm foundation of faith, even in this cloud. And so we live our lives in fear that somehow we will not have everything we need and we'll have to do without, and we may suffer. And then we look at this hall of heroes of faith, these people in this cloud of witnesses, and we realize that they went around naked and destitute. They were stoned, they were sawed in half, they gave up their comfort and security for something better. And we find in this cloud of witnesses a hope, a faith that silences the fear. We look around and we're afraid that maybe living this Christian life isn't really worth it after all. And we see people in this hall of heroes of faith who've been willing to give up everything, including their lives, in order to find themselves in the presence of God. We live in fear that this Christianity that we've embraced is really just dying. It seems to be a thing of yesterday. Nobody's buying into Christianity anymore. It's a dying religion. And then we look in this cloud of witnesses. We get our head in the clouds, and what we see is that the church is bursting at the seams around the world. Do you know, about 100 years ago, less than 10% of the population of the continent of Africa was Christian. By 2030, they estimate it will be 40% of that continent. We're seeing similar remarkable growth of the church in Asia, in Latin America. It may not be growing on your street, but it's growing around the world. And how do we know? Get your head in the cloud. Get your head in the cloud. See more clearly than you would otherwise, so that you're not blindsided by these blind spots. Well, I hope you're experiencing a cloudless day. And I hope you have all the space in the cloud that you need. But if somebody says to you with a critical tone that you've got your head in the clouds, just make sure it's the right cloud. Let's pray. Father, I thank you for this great cloud of witnesses into which you've included us. I thank you that you've given us the privilege of being part of something that's way bigger than we are. Something we can hold on to, something that's firm, something that even though it's a cloud, it's more solid than the world around us. Thank you for allowing us through this cloud of witnesses to see ourselves and our culture more clearly, to avoid those blind spots, avoid being blindsided by them, and to run with perseverance this race marked out for us. I pray for each person that's listening to this sermon. And I ask, Father, that if they aren't already a part of this cloud of witnesses, that they will make their commitment to you and kneel in faith and accept you as their Savior, so that they can share in this great inheritance. And if they are a part of the cloud of witnesses, Father, help us to keep our head in the cloud. Since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us run with perseverance the faith, the race marked out for us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Dr. Lennox, and thank you for praying for us today. Just before we partake in communion, let me remind you of the podcast extras. Those are available as a link that's in the description box below. That link gives you opportunity to be able to connect with us here through our church, as well as with some questions that are journaling and conversation based to be able to help us to process what we've heard Dr. Lennox talk about today, as well as take a few minutes to engage in worship. And some of those songs that are available there are chosen by our worship team to be able to help us as we walk through this week and engage with Jesus in worship. Now today we're going to partake in communion, and I trust that you have some elements available, some bread and some juice. And so in the next few minutes, we're going to partake together of communion at home. We're reminded when we think about communion that on the night that Jesus was betrayed, he took bread, and he was celebrating Passover with his disciples, and as he was in that process, he was sharing a new covenant with us. And he took that bread from the old covenant and he said, now this bread represents my body, which is broken for you. And when you eat it, remember me. Let's eat together. In that evening as well, he took a cup, and we know it was one of the cups of celebration, and he said, this is part of a covenant that is now sealed with my blood. And when you drink this cup, it reminds you of the forgiveness that I've given to you. Let's drink together. Father, we are so grateful to you for your goodness to us, for the way that you have transformed our lives by bringing us into your family. We are a part of so many others that have gone before, so many others that are around the world. We are in a cloud of witnesses, and we are so grateful for the fact that you love us and you've included us in your family. And so today, we are looking to you to continue to point us forward in the journey that we find ourselves on. We love you and we thank you. We praise you for the way that you're at work in us. Continue to guide us each day. In your name I pray. Amen. Once again, thanks for joining us here for a few moments today. And before you go, if you don't mind taking just a minute to like, comment or share this video. I know that that is a great encouragement to us, and we are grateful for the times that you do. Have a great day, and as we minister God's blessings where we live, where we work, where we play, and where we learn, we're praying for you, and we trust you're praying for us as well. We'll see you again soon.